I will deal with you today.
Please don't.
Come back here!
No, get away!
Come back here!
The rain wasn't even a drizzle. It was just a thick, suffocating mist that stuck to my clothes, my lungs. God, they felt like they were filled with broken glass. Every time I turned the corner, I could hear his boots. Stomp, stomp. Silas didn't have to run. He knew I was tired. He knew I had nowhere left to go. Ruth, come on, baby. Don't be like that, he called out. His voice was, it was way too calm. Like he was calling a dog that had slipped its leash. I ducked behind a dumpster, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip my own elbows. Then I saw it, a black sedan, not a Cadillac or a Lincoln, something heavy, European, and blacker than the night itself. It was idling in front of a gate that looked like it belonged to a fortress. The exhaust was a low, steady hum, a heartbeat in the dark. I didn't think, I couldn't, I bolted. I tripped over my own feet, sliding across the wet pavement until my palms were raw. A man was stepping out, tall, shoulders like a mountain. He looked down at me. His face was like it was carved out of granite. No expression, just stillness. I grabbed his leg. My fingers dug into the fine wool of his trousers. Hide me, I choked out, my voice cracking. Please, he's coming. The man, Hon Gin, didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just looked down at my hand, then up at the shadow emerging from the mist. Silas rounded the corner, chest out, that stupid, arrogant smirk plastered on his face. Hey, you, Silas pointed a finger, puffing himself up. That's my girl, she's having a moment. Just stay out of it, man. Silas took one more step, and then he stopped. He didn't just stop, he froze. It was like he hit an invisible wall of ice. Hon Gin didn't reach for a weapon, he didn't even raise his voice. He just stood there, one hand in his pocket, looking at Silas like he was a bug on a windshield. Is she? Hon Jin's voice was deep. It wasn't loud, but it carried this weight, like a gavel hitting a stone table. Silas started to say something, but the words died in his throat. He looked at the car, then at the two men who had silently appeared behind Hon Gin. They didn't look like street thugs. They looked like professionals. She's with me, Silas stammered, his smirk turning into a grimace. Hon Gin looked back down at me. His eyes weren't kind, but they weren't Silas's eyes. Get in the car, he said to me. It wasn't a suggestion. The interior of the car smelled like leather and something metallic, clean, cold. I huddled in the corner of the back seat, trying to make myself as small as possible. Through the tinted glass, I watched Silas standing on the curb. He looked small. For the first time in a year, Silas looked like something that could be broken. The car moved. No music, just the soft whir of the tires. Hon Gin sat in the front, his head perfectly still. He didn't ask my name. He didn't ask why a man was hunting me through the streets at midnight. We pulled into a driveway lined with ancient oaks. The moss hanging from the trees looked like ghosts in the headlights. The gates behind us closed with a heavy, mechanical thud, a sound of finality. Thank you, I whispered. My voice sounded tiny in that expensive space. Hon Gin didn't turn around. Don't thank me yet, he said. You're in my house now. That means you follow my rules, you don't speak unless spoken to, you don't leave this property, and you don't. He paused, his silhouette sharp against the dashboard lights. You don't make me regret this. He led me up a staircase that felt like it belonged in a museum. Everything was white marble and dark wood. It was beautiful, but it felt like a tomb. There were no photos on the walls, no mess, no life. He opened a door at the end of the hall. Sleep, he said. The room was massive. The bed was covered in silk that felt like water. But I didn't go to the bed. I went to the door. I waited for the sound of a key turning in the lock, for the click that would tell me I was a prisoner. Pause, 2 seconds. It never came. The silence was, it was louder than the rain. I sat on the edge of the mattress, my heart still hammering against my ribs. I looked at my hands. They were still stained with the grease and dirt of the street. I was safe, for now. But as I stared at the door, I realized I didn't even know this man's name. I only knew that he had a power that made the devil himself turn tail and run. And I wondered, what did a man like that want with a woman like me? I woke up to the smell of coffee, real expensive coffee. For a second, I forgot where I was. I reached for my phone, thinking I had to hide it before Silas checked my messages. And then I saw the room, the marble, the silk. I walked downstairs, my footsteps echoing. The house was even bigger in the daylight. I found him in a dining room that could have sat 20 people. He was alone, reading a newspaper, a real, physical newspaper. He didn't look up. There is clothes in the wardrobe upstairs, your size, or clothes enough. How did you? I started, then stopped. Of course he knew my size. Men like him knew everything before they even walked into a room. I can't stay here for free, I said, my voice gaining a little bit of strength. I can work, I can clean, I can. I was a researcher, I'm good with details. He folded the paper, slowly. The sound of the crisp pages turning felt like a threat. He looked at me then, really looked at me. His eyes were a dark, bottomless brown. I don't need a maid, Ruth, he said. My heart skipped. I hadn't told him my name. He slid a manila folder across the long table. I opened it. My whole life was in there. My birth certificate, my college transcripts, my bank statements, or what was left of them after Silas bled me dry. And then there were photos of Silas. Photos of him at a bar, photos of him at his office, photos of him crying on the sidewalk after the car drove away. Silas Vance, Hon Gin said, leaning back. Son of a state senator, a man who thinks his last name is a shield. He's been harassing you for 14 months. You filed 3 police reports. All 3 were lost. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. How do you have this? In this city, information is the only currency that matters, he replied. He's a nuisance, a fly buzzing around a lamp, but he's a fly with a very powerful father to keep you here, to hide you. It's not just a favor, it's a political statement. He stood up, walking toward me. He was so much taller than I realized. So, let's be clear, you aren't a guest. You are a strategic asset. As long as you are under my roof, he can't touch you, but if you walk out that gate, you're on your own. I spent the next few days learning the limits of my cage. The garden was beautiful, high stone walls topped with wrought iron. There were cameras everywhere, small black eyes that followed me as I walked. I saw the men who worked for him. They didn't talk to me. They didn't even look at me. It was like I was a ghost. Only Hon Gin. He was the only one who seemed to acknowledge I occupied space. One afternoon, I was sitting by the fountain, trying to read a book I'd found in the library. I felt a shadow fall over me. You're restless, he said. He was wearing a black shirt, sleeves rolled up. I saw a tattoo on his forearm. Ancient, sharp lines that looked like a language I didn't know. I'm used to having a purpose, I said, looking up at him. Being a strategic asset is a bit boring. He almost smiled. It wasn't a real smile, just a softening of the corners of his mouth. Boredom is a luxury, Ruth. Most people in your position are usually screaming or pleading. I did my pleading on the street, I said, my voice steady. I'm done with that. He looked at me for a long time. It felt like he was looking past my skin, right into the parts of me I kept hidden. Good, he said. Keep that, you'll need it. The first phone call came on a Tuesday. I was in the kitchen, trying to figure out the industrial-sized espresso machine when the house phone rang. It was a sharp, old-fashioned sound. One of the security men, a guy with a scarred eyebrow named Vance, no relation to Silas, picked it up. His face went hard. He looked at me, then at the door. Boss, it's for you, the senator. Hon Gin walked into the room. He didn't look bothered. He took the phone. Senator Vance, to what do I owe the pleasure? I held my breath. I could hear a faint, angry buzzing coming from the receiver. The senator was shouting. Hon Gin just listened, his face as calm as a lake at dawn. I don't know what you're talking about, Hon Gin said, his voice smooth as silk. I haven't seen your son, but Senator, if I were you, I'd tell him to stay away from the east side. It's not very safe for someone with his delicate temperament. He hung up. No anger, no drama. He just looked at me and said, "He's getting desperate. That's when people make mistakes." That night, the house felt different, tenser. The security guys were moving faster, their voices low whispers in the halls. I couldn't sleep. I went down to the kitchen to make some tea, chamomile, the only thing that seemed to quiet my mind. I found Hon Gin sitting at the kitchen island. No newspaper this time, just a glass of something amber and a stack of ledgers. "You're awake," he said. "Thinking," I replied. I moved to the stove, my movements slow. "Does it ever get quiet for you? In your head, I mean." He was silent for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he sighed, a real human sound. "Only when I'm winning," he said. I sat down across from him, the steam from my tea rising between us. "Are you winning now?" He looked at the ledgers, then at me. "The senator is trying to freeze my construction permits. He's trying to squeeze my legitimate businesses to get his son's toy back. He thinks money is the same thing as power." "And what is power?" I asked. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "Power is the ability to say no when everyone else is saying yes. Power is knowing exactly what someone is willing to lose." The next morning, I found a small package on the bedside table. No note, just a brand new phone and a keycard. I went down to find Hon Gin, but he was already gone. Vance was standing by the door. "He said you can go into town today," Vance said, his voice gruff. "But I'm driving, and I stay within 10 feet of you at all times, no exceptions." "Why the change?" I asked. Vance shrugged. "The boss says if we keep you locked up, Silas wins. He wants Silas to see you. He wants him to see that you aren't hiding anymore. You're protected." As we drove through the streets of Savannah, I felt a strange mix of terror and, well, pride. We passed the coffee shop where I used to work. I saw Silas's car parked across the street. I didn't duck, I didn't hide my face. I looked straight through the window, and for a split second I saw him, Silas. He looked haggard, angry. And then I saw Vance reach into his jacket, just a subtle movement to show he was ready. Silas didn't move. He didn't even start the engine. I realized then, I wasn't just a guest. I was a weapon Hon Gin was using to break a senator. But as we drove away, I didn't feel like a tool. I felt like I was finally breathing again. The tension is shifting now. It's moving from the cold safety of the house to the heat of the city, and the strategic part of their deal is starting to feel, well, a lot more personal. The air in the car on the way back from town was heavy. Not the bad kind, not like with Silas, but the kind of heavy you feel before a summer storm hits Savannah. Vance didn't say a word, but I could feel his eyes on the rearview mirror, checking every tail, every shadow. I looked at the new phone in my lap. It was silent. No blocked calls, no screaming texts. It was almost eerie. For a year, that vibrating plastic in my pocket had been a literal ticking bomb. Now, nothing. When we pulled through the gates, Hon Gin was standing on the porch. He didn't have a jacket on and his tie was loosened. He looked human, almost tired. "Did he see you?" Hon Gin asked as I stepped out. He didn't move toward me, but his presence. It just sort of filled the space between us. "He saw me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "He looked miserable." Hon Gin nodded, a short, sharp motion. "Good. Misery leads to desperation. And desperation leads to him calling his father for a favor he can't repay. Go inside, Ruth. The humidity is rising." I couldn't sleep. The silence of that big house. It was starting to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a giant ear, waiting for me to make a mistake. I crept down to the kitchen, my bare feet cold on the marble. He was there, again. He had a glass of water and was staring out the window into the pitch-black garden. He didn't turn around when I walked in. "You move like a cat," he murmured. "Most people, well, they stumble around in the dark, you glide." "I spent a year trying not to be heard," I said, leaning against the counter. "You learn how to walk on the balls of your feet when you're living with a man who hits things when he's startled." I saw his jaw tighten, just a tiny muscle jumping in his cheek. He turned then, his eyes dark and unreadable. He won't hit anything ever again, not while I'm breathing. It wasn't a romantic line. It wasn't a promise. It was a fact, like saying the sun would come up, and for some reason, that hit me harder than any poem could. The next morning, the strategy changed. A man in a very sharp, very gray suit arrived. He wasn't one of the muscle guys. He was a lawyer, a shark in a briefcase. Hon Gin called me into the office. The room smelled like old books and expensive tobacco. "Ruth, this is Mr. Elias," Hon Gin said, gesturing to the man. "He's been looking into the accidental loss of your police reports." The lawyer smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It turns out, Miss Ruth, that Senator Vance's chief of staff has a very close relationship with the precinct captain. We found the digital trail. They didn't just lose them. They deleted them." My heart did a slow somersault. Can we use that? "We aren't going to court," Hon Gin said, his voice dropping an octave. "Courts take years. We are going to provide this information to the senator's primary opponent, and we are going to do it anonymously." "But what about Silas?" I asked. Hon Gin leaned forward, his hands folded on the desk. "When the father falls, the son loses his shadow, and in the sun, Silas is nothing." A storm finally broke over the city. Thunder that shook the floorboards and rain so thick you couldn't see the gates from the front door. I found a way up to the small balcony off the third floor. I just wanted to feel the wind. I was tired of being protected. I wanted to be part of the world again. The door creaked behind me. It was Hon Gin. He was holding an umbrella, but he didn't open it. He just stood there in the rain, getting soaked. "You'll catch a cold," he said. "I don't care," I laughed, wiping water from my eyes. "It's better than the silence." He walked over to the railing, standing beside me. We were both drenched in seconds. He looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't look like a boss. He looked like a man who was lonely. "Why did you do it?" I asked, the rain muffling my voice. "Why did you help me that night? You could have just driven away." He looked out at the blurred lights of Savannah. "Because," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "I recognized the look in your eyes. I've spent my whole life being the person people run from. I wanted to see what it felt like, to be the one they ran to." The next day, there was a box on my bed. It wasn't clothes this time. I opened it and found a laptop. Not a cheap one, either. It was a high-end machine, the kind I'd used back when I was still a researcher, before Silas made me quit my job. There was a sticky note on the screen. "The East Side project needs a data audit. If you're bored, start there." I sat down and cried, not because of the computer, but because he'd remembered. He'd remembered I was a researcher. He wasn't just hiding me, he was giving me back my brain. I spent 10 hours straight in those files. It was construction data, payrolls, zoning laws. It was a mess, but it was a beautiful mess. I found 3 errors in the first hour that would have cost him thousands. When he came in to check on me that evening, I didn't even look up. "Your foreman in District 4 is overcharging you for concrete," I said, pointing at the screen. He stood behind me, looking at the numbers. I could feel the heat radiating off him. "I knew you were a researcher," he said softly. "I didn't know you were a detective." The peace didn't last. It never does. I was in the library when I heard it. A loud, crashing sound from the front of the house. Not a gunshot. Hon Gin didn't allow guns unless it was an emergency, but the sound of glass shattering. I ran to the hallway. Vance was already there, his hand inside his jacket. "Get back, Ruth, into the panic room." "What is it?" I shouted. "It's him," Vance spat. "The idiot actually did it." I looked through the gap in the banister. Silas was in the foyer. He looked insane. His hair was a mess, his shirt was torn, and he was clutching a heavy brick. He wasn't a threat to a man like Hon Gin, but he was a threat to himself. "Give her back," Silas screamed. His voice was cracked, desperate. "You can't keep her. I know who you are. I'll tell everyone." Hon Gin stepped out of the shadows of the dining room. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, like he'd just found a leak in a pipe. "Silas," Hon Gin said, his voice echoing in the marble hall. "You've broken my window. That was That was very expensive glass. I didn't go to the panic room. I couldn't. I walked down the stairs, one step at a time, until I was standing behind Hon Gin. Silas saw me. His eyes turned into saucers. Ruth, come here. He's a criminal, baby. He's hurting you, I know it. I looked at Silas. I looked at the man who had followed me to my grocery store, who had called my mother to tell her I was a drug addict, who had made me afraid of my own shadow. He isn't hurting me, Silas, I said, my voice as cold as the floor. He's the only reason I'm still standing. I love you, Silas yelled, taking a step forward. Vance moved to intercept him, but Hon Gin held up a hand. Love? Hon Gin asked. He walked towards Silas, slow and predatory. You don't love her. You love the way she makes you feel powerful. But look at you now, Silas. You're standing in my house, covered in rain, holding a brick. You aren't powerful. You're a pathetic boy who's about to lose everything because his father can't bail him out of this one. Hon Gin leaned in, whispering something into Silas's ear that I couldn't hear. Silas's face went pale. The brick slipped from his hand, thudding onto the rug. The police arrived 10 minutes later. Not the ones Silas's father controlled, but the county sheriff's Hon Gin had been cultivating for months. They took Silas away in handcuffs. He didn't fight. He just stared at the floor, looking like he'd finally realized the world was much bigger than his father's office. When the house was quiet again, the workmen were already boarding up the window. Hon Gin was standing in the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of water. He handed one to me. His hand was steady, but I noticed a small cut on his thumb from the glass. Are you okay? I asked, reaching out. I took his hand before I could think about it. He looked down at our joined hands. He didn't pull away. I'm fine, he said. He's gone, Ruth, truly gone. My lawyer is filing the restraining order in a different county. And the senator, well, he's going to be very busy with a grand jury next week. You did all that, for me, I whispered. He looked up at me, his eyes softening in a way that made my breath hitch. I did it for us, he said. The next few weeks were strange. The threat was gone, but I didn't want to leave, and Hon Gin didn't ask me to. The strategic asset label was gone. I was working on his business files every day, and at night we'd sit in the library. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we just sat in the same room, the silence finally feeling, well, comfortable. One night I was looking at a map of his new development project. You should put a park here, I said, pointing to a vacant lot. The neighborhood needs a place for kids. He looked at the map, then at me. Parks don't make money, Ruth. No, I said, looking him in the eye. But they make a community, and you said you wanted to be someone people run to, right? He studied me for a long time. Then he took a pen and circled the lot. A park it is, he murmured. I felt a flutter in my chest that had nothing to do with fear. It was something I hadn't felt in years. It was hope. It was a Friday night. The air was sweet with the smell of jasmine. Hon Gin was leaving for a business dinner, the kind he usually went to alone. He was at the door, putting on his coat. He paused, looking at the stairs where I was standing. Ruth, he said. Yeah. I'm going to a gala. It's mostly boring people talking about interest rates, but there will be music and good food. He hesitated. The great Hon Gin actually looked nervous. Would you like to come? Not as an asset, not as a guest, but as my partner. I felt a smile spread across my face, the kind of smile that reaches your eyes and stays there. I walked down the stairs, stopping just a foot away from him. I'd love to, I said. He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray braid away from my face. Good, he whispered. Then let's show this city what they've been missing. This is the final stretch. The transition from survival to a shared future, where the strategic masks finally come off for good. The dress was a deep, shimmering emerald. It felt like armor, but the kind that made me feel beautiful instead of hidden. When I walked down those marble stairs, Hon Gin was waiting at the bottom. He wasn't looking at his watch or his phone. He was just looking at me. You look, he cleared his throat, a rare moment of hesitation. You look like you belong here, Ruth. The gala was held in a ballroom that smelled like expensive lilies and old money. I could feel the whispers as we walked in. People knew Hon Gin, they feared him, they respected his bank account, but they'd never seen him with anyone. I leaned into him, my hand resting on his forearm. His muscles were tense, but he didn't pull away. "They're starring," I whispered. "Let them," he replied, his voice a low rumble against the music. "They're starring because for the first time in 10 years, I'm not the most interesting thing in the room." The night wasn't just about champagne. In a corner of the balcony, away from the violins, we saw him, Senator Vance. He looked 10 years older than he had in the news clips. His suit was wrinkled, and his hands were shaking as he held a martini. He marched toward us, his face turning a blotchy red. "You," he spat, looking at Hon Gin. "You destroyed my son, you destroyed my career." Hon Gin didn't even blink. He just took a slow sip of his drink. "No, Senator, your son destroyed himself. You just provided the shovel. I simply pointed out where the dirt was." "I'll have you audited. I'll call the feds," the senator hissed. Hon Gin stepped closer, his shadow swallowing the older man. "The feds are already at your office, Senator. I'd suggest you use your last phone call to find a very good lawyer, not for your son, for yourself." The senator looked at me, his eyes full of a dying, pathetic rage. I didn't flinch. I just looked back with all the peace I'd found in that big, quiet house. He turned and stumbled away, a ghost in a tuxedo. The city lights blurred past the window of the sedan. The adrenaline was fatting, leaving a strange, warm hum in my chest. Hon Gin was quiet, staring out at the dark trees of the Savannah outskirts. "It's over, isn't it?" I asked. "The senator resigned an hour ago," he said. "Silas is being moved to a facility in the north. He won't be coming back to Georgia, not for a long time." I leaned my head back against the leather seat and closed my eyes. I thought I'd feel louder, more excited. "Justice is rarely loud, Ruth," he murmured. "It's usually just a quiet room where you can finally sleep." He reached over, his hand covering mine on the seat. His palm was warm and rough. I didn't pull away. I turned my hand over and laced my fingers with his. We didn't say another word until we reached the gates. That night, I did something I hadn't done since the night I fell at his feet. I walked into my room, and I didn't check the lock. I didn't even close the door all the way. I sat by the window, watching the moon reflect off the fountain in the garden. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about Silas. I wasn't thinking about the police or the strategic assets. I was thinking about the way Hon Gin had looked at me on the balcony, not like a protector, but like a man who was hungry for something he couldn't buy. I stood up and walked down the hall to his study. The light was still on under the door. I knocked, a soft, hesitant sound. "Come in," he said. He was sitting at his desk, but he wasn't working. He was just sitting there in the dark, the only light coming from a single lamp. "I can't stay here as a guest anymore, Gin," I said. Using his first name felt like breaking a glass wall. He stood up, his face half hidden in the shadows. "I know. I have my own money now. I have the job offers from the research firms you suggested I look into. I could leave tomorrow." He walked around the desk, stopping just inches from me. I could smell the rain and the faint scent of wood smoke on him. "And is that what you want, to leave?" "No," I whispered. "But I won't stay because I'm afraid. I won't stay because I need a boss." He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. "Good, because I don't want a guest, and I certainly don't want a subject." "Then what do you want?" My voice was barely a breath. He looked at me with an intensity that made my knees weak. "I want someone who knows exactly who I am, and stays anyway. I want someone who challenges the way I see the world. I want you, Ruth, in whatever way you're willing to give." He didn't lean in, he didn't force the moment. He just waited. He gave me the one thing no one else ever had, the choice. I reached up, my hands trembling slightly as I cupped his face. "I'm not running anymore, Gin. I'm staying, not because I have to, but because I want to." When he finally kissed me, it wasn't like a movie. It was desperate and messy and full of all the words we hadn't been able to say for months. It felt like, well, it felt like coming home. The weeks that followed were different. The house didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a home. Vance and the other guys still hovered, but they started to treat me with a new kind of respect. Not the kind you give a boss's girlfriend, but the kind you give a partner. I started managing the legit side of the business full-time. Hon Gin realized that a woman with a PhD in research was worth 10 men with guns. We spent our mornings in the garden. He taught me how to prune the roses, and I taught him how to relax his shoulders for more than 5 minutes at a time. "You're smiling," he said one morning, looking over at me. "I am," I realized. I forgot what it felt like to just exist without waiting for the other shoe to drop. We stood in the middle of the new park in District 4. The grass was green, the swings were up, and there were kids running around who didn't know anything about mafia bosses or strategic assets. Hon Gin looked at the plaque near the entrance. It didn't have his name on it. It had mine, the Ruth Community Center. "You did this," he said, pride shining in his eyes. "We did this," I corrected him. "You provided the means, I provided the heart. It's a good trade, don't you think?" He laughed, a real, genuine sound that I'd grown to love more than anything. "The best trade I ever made, Ruth." I blink, the steam from my mug warming my face. The flashback fades, leaving me here, in our kitchen, in our life. I look out the window. Gin is still out there, his sleeves rolled up, his hands in the dirt. He looks up and catches my eye. He doesn't wave, he's not a waver, but he gives me that small, private nod that says everything I need to hear. I'm not the girl who fell at his feet anymore. I'm the woman who stands beside him. And Sila's, well, he's just a bad dream I had a long time ago. I take a sip of my tea. It's perfect. Everything is perfect. People ask me sometimes, they ask if I regret that night, if I wish I'd run to a police station instead of a black sedan. And I just smile, because they don't know that sometimes. The monster is the only one who knows how to keep you whole. They don't know that a strategic decision can turn into a conscious choice. And that choice, it can save your life in ways you never expected. He's coming inside now, I should go, but thanks for listening. It feels good to finally tell the whole story, to show you that even in the dark, well, there's always a way out. You just have to be brave enough to grab onto the first hand that offers to hide you.